Thanks, Lori. Boy, this is a great venue. Just looking around. So we don't have a PowerPoint presentation. We have two handouts, and hopefully everybody received them. One of them looks like this. It just says Child Support Bureau and then County Auditors at the top. And then the other one looks like this and says County Incentive Fund Balances as of March 31st, 2015. Is there anybody that did not receive either both or one of these? There's one. Would you mind keeping your hand up? Oh, you got them? Okay. It's hard to see at the very end. Anybody else? Okay, good. What we thought was that rather than do a PowerPoint, we would give you something that was also more of reference documentation for you to take back with you. We're not going to go into all the details that were on here, just cover it high level. So as Lori said, I am the head of the Child Support Bureau, so I know we've got several new auditors. So to frame this up for you, the Indiana Department of Child Services state agency has two sides to it. One side is child welfare, so child protective services, foster care, adoption. The other side is child support. Child support's Title 4D. It's Title 4D of the Social Security Act. So when you think about public assistance like TANF, TANF is Title 4A of the Social Security Act. Child support is Title 4D of the Social Security Act. Title 4D is highly federally regulated. We're going to talk in a minute about the federal funding. So Congress gives Title 4D quite a bit of money, and because of that, then they say, okay, well, because we're giving you a lot of money, we're going to put a lot of federal regulations on you. So one of those is that every state has to have a Title 4D program. Every state has to have one agency within that state that's responsible for Title 4D and child support. And in Indiana, that agency is the Child Support Bureau. And one of the things the feds say is they don't want the pieces of that spread between a lot of state agencies. They want it to be within one agency. So in Indiana, the Child Support Bureau has been the Title 4D agency at the state level through all sorts of changes within the bigger state agencies. So for those of you who have been around for a while, Department of Public Welfare had a Child Support Bureau. Family and Social Services Administration had a Child Support Bureau. When Indiana Department of Child Services was created, we've got a Child Support Bureau. So we are specifically responsible for child support Title 4D. So that was one of the rules. But then Congress said to the states, so the way you actually carry out your services, you state can decide how you want to do that. So Title 4D was enacted in 1975, and the way Indiana chose to do it in 1976 was they wanted things down at the local level. So the Child Support Bureau, we've got some things that we're statutorily required to do, and then we have cooperative agreements with the 91 prosecuting attorneys and the 92 clerks of court, and then we also have cooperative agreement with some what we call Title 4D courts in, I've forgotten how many counties now, but 40 counties or so. So that's how the child support services are actually delivered at the local level, is through these cooperative agreements. So that's kind of a big picture. Some of you already know this, but I thought for some of you who were newer and hadn't been introduced to us that I would give you a little bit of a framework. So now what we're going to do is we're going to walk through this document, as I said, at a high level. So the very first thing we put on here was what your responsibilities are when it comes to Title 4D and child support. So we obviously work really, really closely with the clerks and the prosecutors in terms of the services. They get quite a bit of federal money that flows from the federal government through us down to them, but that money really goes to you guys. So we have to work with you when it comes to the money itself. So that's a little bit of our interaction. So that's the first point, that we work closely with you all when it comes to this money interaction. The second point talks about the funds, the 6 funds where that money has to go when you get it. So we've just laid those out. Again, we put this together as more of a reference document for you, so I'm not going to go into all the detail. but hopefully this is a quick reference for you. This next point is about what we call incentive balances. And I'm going to talk a little more about the federal funding later, but there's a document that the auditors need to fill out and send to us every quarter where you're reporting to us what the incentive balances are when it comes to child support. And one of our responsibilities that I'll touch on right now is, so you guys are keeping those balances. The prosecutors and the clerks and the courts are spending incentive money. They have to send reports to us. It's our responsibility to make sure that those match because, again, highly federally regulated, there are rules about that incentive money that it can only be spent for child support purposes. So occasionally, not intentionally, in a county, some of that incentive money might go someplace else. And it's our responsibility to monitor to make sure we do that. And the way we do it is we check the balance against the expenditures. So that's point C on this document. One of the things that we wanted to tell you that's coming is if you look at page 6, we've given you some reference materials at the back of this. So that's what the actual form of the quarterly incentive balance document looks like. We also have an online tool where you can fill the information out. So some of you who are using that may or may not have actually seen this particular document. One of the changes that we're making, this has 2 signatures on it right now. And when we did these on the incentive expenditure document, we had to have 2 signatures. And so we kind of automatically, as we were all working together on it, put 2 signatures here. Well, it doesn't necessarily make sense to have both a preparer and a certifier. So we are making the change so that there will only be 1 signature on the incentive balance document. And we think that's going to be implemented in late summer. So that's item C. Item D on here talks about the other documents that the prosecutors and clerks have to fill out. You guys don't have to do it, but we wanted to give you that frame of reference again, that there are several other documents that are coming into us. So that monthly expense claims document, that's what they fill out to actually get the federal funding. And then that quarterly incentive expenditure document is what they fill out to report to us how much they've spent. The next item, E, just tells you what the handouts are that are in here. So we'll talk about it a little later, but when we send the money to you guys, it can go into a lot of different places. So a gentleman by the name of Rob Conrad, who many of you probably have worked with, who's in the Department of Child Services in the financial unit, he sends out remittance notices to you all, and he's got lots of instructions on there to try to help you know exactly where that money needs to go. And he also prepared a 1-page quick reference document, and that's on page 5. So that's something that you can use so that you know exactly where the money goes. The very last point, F here, so when State Board of Accounts does your audits, they almost always look at Title 4D. So if they're coming into your county and doing an audit, they're almost always looking at Title 4D. If there are audit findings on the clerk or the prosecutor or the court, it's that clerk, prosecutor, or court's responsibility to let the Child Support Bureau know. But if there aren't any audit findings, many of you send us a letter to let us know. And we really appreciate that. And I've put this on here to ask you if you would continue to do that. It helps us a lot to actually know, okay, State Board of Accounts has done its audit. When it comes to 4D, your county was great, no audit findings. So that's something on here as well. Before I move on, I realized that I forgot to do some introductions that I intended to do because I just wanted to jump right into this document. So, the gentleman beside me is Adam Norman, and he is one of my assistant deputy directors. He's actually been in that spot officially a couple of weeks now. So He's not new to child support. He's not new to Title 4D. He's not new to Child Support Bureau, but he's been promoted into this particular position, and he is over our internal monitoring unit. So he's the Assistant Deputy Director over that particular unit, and he's going to talk about some of the items on this handout in a few minutes. Then Peggy Boggs, if you could stand. So Peggy is someone whom you may work with as well. Peggy is over our financial operations within the Child Support Bureau. So the folks in her unit are responsible for making sure child support money flows. So payments that come in, payments that go either to repay TANF or going out to families fall under her. So anything when it comes to financial, when it comes to doing any kind of reconciliation, Peggy's our go-to gal within Child Support Bureau. Jeff Miller's next. So going back to that internal monitoring unit, Jeff is our supervisor. And I know in the back you guys probably can't see very well, but I wanted to try to have faces and names to go together. The next person is Lisa Smith. Lisa's relatively new to our monitoring unit, but she's not new to DCS or the Child Support Bureau. And she's one of our people who actually do the monitoring. So when you're sending those incentive balance documents in, and we're comparing them to those quarterly incentive expenditure documents, Lisa's one of the people that's looking at that and maybe contacting either the clerk or the prosecutor, or maybe contacting you guys to ask a question. And then Chris Nill is Lisa's counterpart. So he's also somebody who's doing that kind of internal monitoring. So these are not all of my folks, but some of the folks that I wanted to make sure that you guys had a face to put to a name, because they may be emailing you or calling you. So let me look at my notes and make sure that I wasn't supposed to do anything else before I launched in. I think that was it. So if you turn the page, so I've talked about your responsibilities. Now let's talk about our responsibilities at the Child Support Bureau. So by federal law, we're supposed to monitor the activities of subrecipients. So a subrecipient are those folks with whom I've got a cooperative agreement. So my prosecutors, child support agencies, the clerks, and as I said, if there's a Title 4D court in the county, we have to monitor the activities to make sure that they're spending those 4D monies from the federal government appropriately. So that next sub-bullet talks about the monitoring team, whom I've just introduced. The other thing we're supposed to do is, as State Board of Accounts does their audits, we review those. And if there has been an audit finding, then we have to follow up with the clerk or prosecutor or whomever. If there was an audit finding relative to 4D, it's our responsibility to follow up with that office, see what they've said their corrective action was, and work with them to make sure that they're actually carrying out that corrective action. The next piece is guidance. So when it comes to the federal funds and how they can be spent and how they can't be spent, it gets pretty complicated. And one of our areas is to make sure that we're providing guidance to the prosecutors and clerks and the courts as required on all of those complicated rules. If something changes, trying to make sure that we're getting that information out to them as much as possible. We've already talked about the next piece, which is reviewing those incentive expenditures and balances. And what I wanted to say, which we've actually put on here, is we really thank you guys. You guys have been so wonderful in when these guys have questions. You've been wonderful in assisting them, getting them ledger information, things that the clerks or prosecutors or courts might not have in order for us to do our job. And we really appreciate your assistance and cooperation and working so closely with you on that. So that bullet point was about the expenditures. That last bullet point is about actually looking at those monthly expense claims documents and making sure that they, mostly that, one, that the clerks and prosecutors and courts are using it for Title 4D. That's not as big an issue. What's a bigger issue is making sure that those offices keep the appropriate backup documentation that they need. So because everything's happening at the local level, we don't require them to send copies of all the voluminous information that State Board of Accounts or a federal auditor might need to look at. But as you guys can imagine, it's constant to talk to those county offices to say, gosh, make sure you're keeping that backup documentation so that when State Board of Accounts comes, or if a federal auditor comes, it's not so painful to gather all of that information and be able to provide it. So one of the things, this last piece, as I said, this is a pretty new unit. So we've been working on things little by little by little. The incentive piece was something we really had to focus on first. Now we're going to start actually visiting some of the county prosecutors and clerks and talking to them more and more about that backup documentation and looking at what they're doing and trying to provide guidance. So we probably won't be visiting you guys when we're out there. We might, but for the most part, we're coming out to look at the clerks, prosecutors, and again, potentially the Title 40, if there's a Title 40 court in your particular county. So that's what our responsibilities are. So we've talked about those things. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about these funding streams and give you just a real high level on that. So the FFP, Federal Financial Participation, when it comes to Title 4D, that is funded at a 66% level. And when it comes to federal programs, that's really pretty high. It's not a block grant program either. So as long as a state and those county offices are spending money for Title 4D appropriately and reasonably, the federal government will reimburse at 66%. There's no cap on the reimbursement when it comes to child support. And that's because Congress a long time ago made a philosophical decision that they thought the activities to make sure that money gets to families, money gets to kids, was so important that it shouldn't be a block grant program. So that's the FFP at 66%. That's those monthly expense claim forms that the county offices fill out so that we can send it to the feds, and the feds send us the money, and we send it back, going through you guys, back into the county general fund. This next piece is probably unique among federal programs, and it's called incentives. So in the mid-90s, Congress decided that they wanted to see how well the child support agencies were performing, and they actually used Title 40 as a little bit of a test, and they set up performance-based incentives. So there's actually a pool of money at the federal level. It's about $530 million, give or take, right now, that every state competes for. And Congress set up very specific performance measures that are used, and every state has to, through its computer system, report information on these performance measures, and the federal government compiles everything and calculates it, and then they see how the states are doing against one another, and then they send this incentive money to the states. So I've given you what those performance measures are on here, just so you've got a little bit of an understanding. So they want to see whether paternity is being established for all the children within that 4D caseload. And in Indiana, our 4D caseload right now is about, give or take, 280,000. So we're about 16th in the nation when it comes to the Title 40 caseload. Then they want to see in all of these cases whether paternity was established or whether it's a divorce case, was a support order established for those families. So a cash financial support order and a medical support order. So those two things, all of those 280,000 cases, what percentage of those were we, prosecutors, CSB, were we able to get a court order for that support? This next piece is the most important one when it comes to getting money to children. It's called current support collections. So every month that a non-custodial parent has an order to pay child support, what percentage within the state is collected and goes to the families? So it can't just be collected, it actually has to be distributed out as well. So for example, if the state had one case and the support order for that one case was $100 every month, and we only had $55 come through the door that month, our current support rate would be 55%. That's how it's calculated. So this is a measure that looks at how consistently we're making sure that non-custodial parents are paying their child support, because it's calculated every month, and every month that goes by, if the money doesn't come in, you lose the opportunity for that. So that's current support collections. Cases paying on arrears is simply, if an arrearage accrued on all of these cases, were you able to get some collections on that arrears? Cost effectiveness, so you can't just spend, it's an open-ended, right? But you can't just spend $1 bazillion and have nothing to show for it. So one of the measures is, for every dollar that you spend in either the Title 4D, the FFP, or that incentive money, how many dollars are you bringing back through the door to go out to those families? In Indiana, we historically have been very cost effective. So we're almost always either above the national average or right at the national average when it comes to cost effectiveness. So that's just an idea of, again, highly federally regulated, right? So that's all of the things they look at to see how much money comes back to Indiana when it comes to this incentive money. So one of the things that our state law says, which is one of the bullet points farther down, and federal law says, okay, you state, if you're a locally operated, you can't just keep all that money. You've got to send that money on to the people who are actually doing the work. So in Indiana, when the incentive money comes from the federal government, then almost all of it is passed down to the counties, and our state statute says how it should be split between those county offices, which is where you guys come in. Because when that money comes in, it very specifically has to go into a separate fund for the prosecutor or the clerk, or what we call the Title 40 incentive fund, which is just a general incentive fund, not county general, but a general incentive fund that either the prosecutors or the clerks or the 4D court, if there's a cooperative agreement, can use that incentive money. So the next set of bullet points, the very first one says county prospective incentive payments are sent quarterly. So this money comes to you guys every quarter. And it used to be that we only sent it yearly. And what we did was, when we got the information from the feds on how well we had done, we figured out how much the counties got and we sent it out. And we had some folks come to us and say, you guys realize you're the only state that's actually doing that way? Everybody else figures out, generally speaking, how well the counties are doing, and they use a formula, and then they send the money prospectively, and they send it more often, because that means that there's a better cash flow to those offices so that they can plan better on how to use that incentive money. So a couple of years ago, we switched over to this quarterly prospective incentive formula. So we're sending quarterly money, it's prospective. It's based on a formula that we came up with in conjunction with your Auditors Association, the Clerks Association, the prosecutors folks a couple of years ago. And we wanted to make sure that we weren't sending too much out, so that if something happened and we didn't do as well, we would be taking money back. So the formula, it's a 3-year average, and we chose 80% because we thought that was an amount that would mean we were doing pretty well. So it's 80% of that average, and then it's 4 payments. So we've been monitoring that every year to see how well we're doing. And then what we do is we do a settle up at the end of the year. So when the feds actually come to us and say, okay, this is how you did, then we compare it against the counties, and you'll get a 5th payment, usually at the beginning of the calendar year. That's the settle up. And you guys just got your settle up amount probably a month ago or so. Know that as the feds are doing this, they're usually a year or sometimes 2 years behind. So you just got federal fiscal year 2013, which is from federal fiscal year ends September 30th, 2013. You just got your 2013 settle up because we just got that information from the federal government. So one of the things I wanted to let you know, this is the first year where we had 3 counties actually have negative amounts. So I'm not going to say who that is, you guys know who you are. But so we sat down and looked at that, and everybody said, okay, so does this mean we need to adjust this formula? Well, the negative amounts were, it was in the hundreds, so it wasn't very big. So everybody said, you know, we think we're still good on this formula. So next year we'll be monitoring very closely. If we have issues again, we'll look at it again and see if maybe we need to go to 75% instead of 80%. So that's the first year that's happened. That next bullet point gives you, in case you're interested, the Indiana code that says exactly how much of this incentive money, where it goes within the county offices. And then we've talked about the remittance notices. So that handout that I told you that Rob Conrad did gives all the information about those incentive funds and where the money needs to go. This last piece, so on the prosecutor's side, our Indiana General Assembly passed some language, 2008, maybe 2007, that allows the prosecutors to hire private collection agencies to do some collections. And some of that money, the way it works, comes back to the county. So I won't go into the details, but this just talks about that. So sometimes you'll get PCA money, and this explains that and where that money needs to go. So that's the basics when it comes to the major funding streams that are coming to you guys. So I'm going to turn it over to Adam now, because he's now going to talk about that incentive money gets a lot of attention on how it should be spent. So he's going to go through with you so you understand at a high level what those basic rules are. Thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia. Good afternoon. Thank you again for having us be here, and thanks for all the help that you do. I worked in accounting for 15 years, and I know how much that you guys work with all the other county offices on child support. So we really appreciate all your efforts that you do. Let's start on point 4, which I believe is on page 3 of your handout. And I'm going to go over some of the high-level basic rules and guidelines on incentive spending. And again, as Cynthia mentioned, this is from the federal government, highly regulated for this incentive funds. So the first thing is that this has to only be used for 4D expenditures. So it has to support and improve the 4D child support program. So the whole goal is to get more money to families and to kids. And so this incentive money is directly to be used to further those purposes. So that's kind of the first couple things to know about incentive money at a high level. And the other important part that needs to be realized is that you have to use this incentive money to supplement, but not supplant or replace, Title 4D child support budgets. So it has to be used in addition to what is already budgeted for your 4D program. So it has to be something additional that can use that the offices in the county think this is going to help get more money to kids in our community. So that's another point on there. And just to understand that the costs that are eligible to be paid with both federal financial participation monies and incentives are pretty much the same. And we have the codes, the Code of Federal Regulations cites in there for you if you want to reference those as well for both of those points. And also that these expenditures have to be appropriate and reasonable. And I know that's kind of a vague term, it's open to interpretation sometimes, but also there's specifically some items that are prohibited, but there's very few, but they're specifically prohibited by the federal regulations. And another point is that incentives, that when you expend them, those are not reimbursable. You cannot get reimbursement on any incentive money that you as a county would spend. So kind of in that vein, Cynthia outlined the different funding sources that go into the county, and with the 4D fund, the clerk, and the prosecutor. At Child Support Bureau, we encourage the offices in the county to work collaboratively together to spend money from all the incentive accounts. So sometimes there can be projects. When I was in a county, there was projects that we all worked together, the clerk, and we had a 4D court in one of my counties, and also the prosecutor. We said, here's something that we all need to do, and we can collectively, with our money, do something great for the families in our community. So we encourage that kind of working together in the spirit of cooperation. And so it's okay to transfer incentive funds between incentive accounts within your county. And if you look, I think it's not marked as page 8, but I think on, it should be page 8, we have an example of the state form, which is an incentive funds transfer agreement. And this would create to maintain a record of the transfer if your county so chooses, with the office's cooperation with each other, to transfer incentive funds from one office in your county to another, from one fund to another. So we have that form available. And also remember that the expenditure of incentive money by Indiana state statute does not require any appropriation by the county fiscal body. So, and then we have the state statute there for your reference on that point as well. So this incentive money can be spent by the office that has those funds without having to get a separate appropriation from the county fiscal body. And we know there, unless you're increasing money for an elected official, that's in the statute as well. So those are some of the basic rules and guidelines that are whenever a county is spending incentive money. So let's talk about the next point, part 5 here. We're talking about the online forms tool. Cynthia mentioned the online forms tool that we have. We developed that, I think, a couple of years ago, I think. And this is where we encourage counties, this is clerks, prosecutors, so we have a cooperative agreement with 40 courts and auditors to use this online tool to submit their claims and their balances. So this is where you can complete the county offices that have one, the monthly expenditure claims form, the quarterly incentive expenditures form, and the quarterly incentive balance online. And you can submit a soft or electronic copy of those forms online, but at this time, it's still required that you submit a signed version of all 3 of those documents, and you can mail that, or you can scan and email it to us to the DCS accounting office. And it says see below for the address. I think if you go down a little bit, just in the next section, it gives the email address where you can send those scanned copies in, or you can mail it to us as well. So we're moving towards using more electronic version and having everything online and having all together one place and one source. So that's one place that you can use that. I think there's been some training that's gone out, and I think we're going to, obviously we can provide more training. I'll give you some more information about that in just a little bit. So some of the report deadlines that we have for these, the ones that really probably interest this audience the most is the Quarterly Incentive Balance Report, the QIB. A signed hard copy, like I said, is due on the 30th, the day after the end of the previous quarter. And this is where the information there, where you can submit that. And the Quarterly Incentive Expenditure Report, or the QIE, that is the soft copy through the online tool. That is due on the 10th day of the month following the end of each quarter. And then the signed hard copy that you need to either mail or send a scanned email copy is due the 17th. So there's just those dates on there for your reference. And that gives you where you can send those into, the email address. So if you kind of look at the note there, this is something that, as Cynthia mentioned, when we're trying to do some of these quality assurance reviews and looking at some ledgers and things, this is an important thing to remember, is that all offices have to report their incentive expenditures on a cash basis, meaning that it's already been paid out, okay? So whenever that they should be reported on an actual cost basis and not just the budgeted basis. And that it really helps if a ledger or transaction history is provided to the county offices who've used these incentive funds, so they're making sure that they are not reporting things before they're actually paid out. So that it helps just make sure it's all the same numbers that are being sent in. So for the remittance notices, so each month, for the monthly expense claim, the MEC that we talked about before, those reimbursements and the quarterly incentive distributions that Cynthia talked about, your offices will get a remittance notice for both of those items whenever those funds have been deposited into the county bank account. So whenever you get those remittance notices, the auditor's offices need to make sure that the amounts that have been received into the bank account matches the amounts listed on the remittance notice. Make sure they're the same, they match. And also, the funds need to be transferred to the appropriate 40 incentive fund account balance based on the remittance notice. And then we reference back to the first page to talk about the SBOA account number, so they're all kind of, so you can see how it flows together. And I talked about a little bit about the online tool, and there's some guidance. So we have some guidance available. Part of our job, as Cynthia mentioned, as part of our responsibility as the Child Support Bureau, is to provide training and guidance on how to use all of these tools, all of these forms, and how to get us the information. And we provide that, and we're adding to that right now monthly is what we're adding to it. So we're rapidly adding those kind of tools that are available for clerks, prosecutors, 40 courts, and for the county auditors to use. So we have a child support resource website, we call it the CSR, and there's an example of it on page 9 of your handout, and this is an example of the, the home page of it whenever you get onto the CSR. And whenever you go down there, if you notice down here, I know everyone in the back can see me pointing, right? But this is down here, there's a link that says 40 claims and incentives. This is the site that has everything that is needed to know about what we're talking about today. And the back page here, I think, which would be at effectively page 10, shows what our sub-site of the 40 incentive claim looks like, and this gives you some idea of what we have on there. We have guides of an administrative claiming guide. We have an overview of the processes and rules and regulations that pertain to our program, to the 4D program, on here as well. So it has a lot of information. It's a pretty robust site. I was surprised when I really dove into it to see how much was on there. And it has a lot of good information that I wish I would have had when I was in the county, actually. But we also have that, all the forms that we've talked about today, we have those on there as well, examples of those, the QIB, the QIE. Training documents, we have also the incentive balances are on there too, to the most recent quarterly reported incentive balances. Those are on there too, so those are there for your view as well. And anytime that you need to gain access to the CSR, you need access to this administrative training guide, and you need training materials or anything like that, especially for the 4D online tool, because it's important that everyone's trained on how to use that. It's actually pretty simple, but it's always with anything new or different, you want to know how to get on it, how to use it, and where am I clicking it right or wrong, and how do I submit it. We have training that we can provide for you, and the name of our county-related operations, I always get that name wrong, is Lori Tolliver, and she works for the Child Support Bureau. She's a senior manager with our bureau, and you can provide the information that's listed there, and you can tell Lori what you're needing, and she will get that information for you, get training for you, get you connected to the right people that can get that information for you. And the last part that we really have on here is just something that we always like to provide is our contacts for everyone. My name and my email and phone number are on here, as are Jeff, Lisa, and Chris's information, and also Rob Conrad's through DCO Accounting Operations. And following in the vein of Cynthia, there's a note that I missed on the previous one. We are also providing, and we're piloting this right now, a interactive PowerPoint that we're giving to the county offices that will be available on the CSR soon, hopefully this summer, about how to provide supporting documentation for personnel services and the expenses that they have, especially when you have split offices that don't have 100% effort towards just child support purposes. So we're piloting that right now. We went to a county yesterday. We're going to one tomorrow. So we're getting that formalized right now, and we getting that sent out to the counties. What you need to know is that because of us asking counties to make sure they have better supporting documentation, they can say, hey, this is why we claimed what we claimed and why we're saying what we're saying. You might be getting requests for some more information, some ledgers, some transaction histories, things like that. So we wanted you to be aware of why your county office might all of a sudden be saying, hey, we need some of this documentation. That's because of this guidance that we're giving them to make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to be doing as well. So is there anything else? Okay, all right. All right, well, thank you very much. I'm going to turn it back over to Cynthia.
So the second handout that you received is a document that we post quarterly to the CSR about incentive balances. So if you look at the very last page of this document, I just wanted to point out to everybody, the CSR, it's a secure intranet site, by the way, so you can't just go out and Google it. So if you guys don't have access to it, then Lori Tolliver and her email address is on here. She's the person to email so that she can go to our state Indiana Office of Technology and get you the credentials that you need to get into this site. But if you look at the very bottom of this, it says incentive documents, and you'll see that this is a little bit of an old screenshot, but this one says fourth quarter 2014 county incentive balances caseload and fourth quarter 2014 county incentive balances. So this is basically what we've handed out. We've given you the document that's in alphabetical order. The caseload document is sorted by that 4D caseload. So if you or your county offices want to see how am I doing in terms of my incentive balance compared to a county that has a similar child support caseload, that's why we just put that in about 6 months ago. That's why we've given you an additional sort. Because sometimes on an alphabetical list, you guys have no idea what the true 4D child support caseloads are in your county. So we wanted to give you another tool so everybody could compare themselves to similar offices. So this document comes out quarterly. This site has the historical documents. We haven't gotten to the point yet where we have to archive anything. So if you're interested to see in how you're doing in terms of progression on your incentive balance, you can also go out here and look at all of the old documents to see how the incentive balances have changed. So I know you guys have all this information, but we wanted to put it in a place that it was easy for everybody to see, you guys and the prosecutors and the clerks. So some of the courts have access to this. I'm not sure very many of them do. So now, I think, oh, we're right on time. Yes. It's on page 4, where it says available guidance, which is Roman numeral 8, the very last paragraph. No problem. That was an easy question. I like that one. Any other questions for us? Good. So if you think of something later, you've got a whole bunch of email addresses and phone numbers to call. Oh, yes, ma'am. Oh, huh. Thank you.
I don't really know if you can answer this, but I'm hoping you can. I get a lot of EFTs that come from Department of Child Services. The ones that I get from Conrad, of course, I know where those go because there are so much details, but I get a lot that I'm assuming are where we're getting reimbursements for per diem for children.
Oh, so those are probably on the child welfare side.
That's what I guess my question was, can I go to the services that you showed on here to find out what those are?
I'm looking at Peggy. Yeah, I don't know that, so Rob, they're not going to be able to answer the question, but they should be able to give you who to go to. And I apologize, I don't know that off the top of my head, but yeah, Rob should be able to tell you who to go to. Any other questions? Okay, great. Well, again, we really appreciate how closely we work together and working with you all. So thank you very much for your time and attention.